What's happening, YouTube? I am Highway to Hill and this is my bike Yamaha R3. So right now I have done around 93,000 kilometers on my R3 and I have lost count which set of tire this is. So it all started with the stock Mezzala Sportec M5, then I got the Pirelli Diablo Rosso 2, then I used Apollo Alpha H1 a couple of times, then I used TVS Pro Torque Extreme, and the last tire that I just got done with was the MRF steel brace. And now I was in the middle of a long trip, like a 6,000 kilometer long trip, and then MRF steel brace, they just it couldn't give me any more life. So in the middle of my trip I had to change the tires and I changed to the Reise TraceRad. Right, so let's have a look at it. This is how it looks like. Looks so familiar to the Pirelli Diablo Rosso 3. The thread pattern is exactly like that. I think except for one tiny detail is that between these two grooves, I think what you will see is a little bit of siping. You can't see it here because I've already done 6,000 kilometers on these tires, but if you see in the front one, you can see. So between this and this pattern, which is just exactly copied from the Pirelli Diablo Rosso 3, it has a one siping line over here. The Diablo Rosso 3 doesn't have this, but otherwise just pretty much the thread pattern looks exactly the same, which is not a bad thing. I mean, it looks really good. I mean, the Pirelli Diablo Rosso 2, 3, they all have amazing looking thread patterns, and yeah, so these tires obviously, I mean, look great, no doubt. The specifications are exactly the same like what we have been seeing in the market from Apollo for H1s, Apollo Alpha H1s, TVS Pro Torque Extreme. Again, same specs, 110 by 60 in the front, 150 by 60 in the rear, 17 inches. Even Seat has this SportRad MRF steel brace. All of these are the same specs. You have your steel belt, and then on top of that you have this whole rubber carcass around the steel belt, and this one is 0 degree. So yeah, better stability, better grip. Specs exactly the same. There are just no changes at all. The changes what you will see is in the shape. When I initially got these tires, it looked a lot like Apollo Alpha H1, but I think these are a bit more round shaped compared to the Apollo Alpha H1. Apollo Alpha H1 are quite wide and very squarish. They look really wide. These are slightly roundish, and in terms of grip, I think these tires are very close to TVS Pro Torque Extreme. They are definitely better and definitely a step above Apollo Alpha H1. Very close to Pro Torque Extreme by TVS. And even the shape I think is somewhere between the squarish shape of Apollo Alpha H1 and the round UV kind of a shape of a TVS Pro Torque Extreme. So what that does is I think when you make quick direction changes, this performs way better than the Apollo Alpha H1, and it's almost as good as probably as the TVS Pro Torque Extreme. So that's a good thing. In terms of grip also, I think it's slightly softer than the Apollo Alpha H1, so I think it grips a little bit better. But I think one thing what I noticed is, so I usually have a tire pressure of 30 in the front and 35 in the rear. And because of the round shape, I think when I reduced the tire pressure a little bit, so I did 28 and then I did 33 at the rear, and I think after that I got a I think a more confident grip out of these tires, because I think then your contact patch also slightly increases. So by reducing a little bit of tire pressure, I think I got excellent grip. I think it's almost as good as your TVS Pro Torque Extreme. So and the price, so I paid 10,950, which is again in between your Apollo Alpha H1. I think you can get as low as maybe 10,500. If you negotiate, if you know dealer, you can go to the shop and get a good discount on that. Now Reise Moto claims that these tires will last 10,000 kilometers. No, sorry, 12,000 kilometers. Now this is how my tire looks at around 6k kilometers. So I've already done 6k. See, usually when I do these videos, as you would have seen, the other videos that are on my channel, on my playlist for Apollo Alpha H1, steel brace, TVS Pro Torque Extreme, I do a first introduction video, and then I do first impressions at 1,000 kilometers, 5,000, and so on. But since I got these tires in the middle of a trip, I couldn't make the video, so this is straight away, and the video at 6,000 kilometers. So this is how the tires look at 6,000. I think looks good. On the rear, I think my siping has disappeared. So like I showed you in the front tire, between these two grooves you have a like a siping line. So it has already disappeared on the rear tire. In the front it's still there. So as you can see in the front, the siping is still there. So I have ridden for 6,000 kilometers. Mostly I was touring on highway, but then I did a lot of ghat sections. A lot of good roads, bad roads. I rode in rain also. It was raining in Puri, Bhubaneswar, Cuttack, and even when I reached Allahabad, it was raining over there as well. So in all these conditions, I think I've rode in all kinds of conditions. Roads, no roads, muddy roads, gravel, stones. I think I rode everywhere, and these tires performed very well, to be honest. I think I've taken these tires through a lot, and yeah, I think this is a really good product from Reise Moto, and I'm so glad we have another option right now. So I would rate these tires better than Apollo Alpha H1. I think you should only get Apollo Alpha H1 in just maybe 2 or 3 situations. Number one, if you really want that 15k 1000 mileage tire life, because Apollo Alpha H1, if you ride carefully, you can easily extract 15,000 kilometers. And on smaller capacity bikes, I know people who have done 17,000 to even 20,000. I myself have extracted 17,000 kilometers out of Apollo Alpha H1. So if that is your main criteria, and only then, I think you should go with Apollo Alpha H1. Apollo Alpha H1 is unless you want a really wide looking, squarish looking tire which looks bigger, wider, that is another reason to get Apollo Alpha H1. But I think today, of all these 4-5 tires, if I compare all of them, I think the Reise Moto and the TVS Pro Torque Extreme are right on top. I would still give it to TVS Pro Torque Extreme. It's such an excellent tire. Again, life you will get around 10 to 12,000, and over here also Reise Moto claims 12,000, so you'll probably end up getting somewhere around 10 to 12,000. So I'm super impressed, quite impressed with the TraceRad, and right from the get-go, these tires performed very well, and even the braking period, everything was so smooth. For example, when you are braking in Apollo Alpha H1, and initially in the first 500 to 600 kilometers, when you start leaning, there is this weird feeling when the contact patch changes from center, and then you start leaving the contact patch, obviously starts moving towards the side. The transition is not very progressive and not very linear, and it's not very smooth. you can feel something is off, you know. It just gives that weird feeling. I think that's because of the shape of the tire. It's quite square and wide. Since this is a bit rounded, when I started leaning initially, as soon as I got it during the, you know, break-in period, first 500-600 kilometers, when you start leaning and the contact pad changes from center to side, that transition is really smooth. You know, you don't have this weird feeling. Very linear, very smooth. And also because these are a bit rounded, you know, so direction changes are much more progressive and much more linear. So that way I think this gave me that feeling of you know, TVS Pro Torque Extreme. TVS Pro Torque Extreme also feels that way. Very, very smooth and linear transition when you're leaning. You can make quick directional changes. So quite impressed with the Reise TraceRad. Let's see how long this will last. Currently at 6,000 kilometers, and looks like it can definitely do. It should definitely do 10k for sure. I don't think these are as soft as the MRF steel brace. MRF steel brace just you know, gave up at around 8k kilometers. So I'm 100% sure these will last longer. So guys, that's the review. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one, in the next update. You ride safe. Ciao.